A Giants podcast for Giants fans
by Giants fans.
It's Shaun Morash.
On the sideline, into the end zone. Touchdown, Giants!
From the offseason to the wins and the losses, it's time to take one Giant step.
Welcome into One Giant Step. I'm Shaun Morash. He's Bryce. Gelman. It is week 2 of the preseason. The Houston Texans await the New York Football Giants at 1 p.m. on Saturday. Bryce did a good job last week kind of recapping the joint practices that existed with the Lions. Appreciate anybody that reached out. Appreciate everybody that downloaded, subscribes to the podcast, as you should always do with the season fast approaching. Everywhere podcasts are available free on the Odyssey app. Had a death in the family, so I was a little bit out of the mix last week. But I will say the one piece of sports content I did get to take in, I was at the first joint practice with the Giants and Lions, basically before all hell broke loose in my life. And overarching theory here, Bryce, before we get into previewing this week and all the news, I walked into that joint practice with all the reporters that I've become very friendly with. A lot of them I consider friends. All of them kind of half joking about how negative they feel like this season is going to go. And within the course of 3 hours, all of those same jokes turned into maybe we're wrong and this team's actually better than we think, because all they saw was the Giants practicing versus the Giants, and the Giants came out of there with 2 really productive days versus the Lions, and I think a lot of positive momentum has been built. So, Bryce, let me just start there. Vibes up on Big Blue entering 2024 after the week that was with the Lions, including the preseason game.
First off, let me just say it's great to have you back.
Anything to
and how about let's get some of those let's get some of those reporters that you're so close with on the podcast. That would be great. No, but listen, I talked about it last week, and I really want
them have their own podcast, buddy. Many of them.
Yeah, whatever. And this is more important, clearly. No, but I knew you were at the joint practices last week, and I discussed it, from afar. Of course, I wasn't there myself, but I wanted to hear your insight on it because of all the positive sentiment resulting from it, specifically from those reporters that you mentioned. There was a complete change in the discourse after those 2 days, Shaun.
Yeah. Well, I think that, first of all, when you're watching a team practice versus another team, and this was noted last year, the Giants practice versus the Lions, the Giants did not look good. And many of them said in hindsight, we should have known then that this team wasn't really ready to compete. The fact that the Giants had 2 really good days versus the Lions, I will just tell you, Brian Burns on the defensive side of the ball and Malik Nabers on the offensive side of the ball, that is an unbelievable. If you're considering it a trade for Saquon Barkley and Xavier McKinney talent-wise, the Giants have upgraded significantly. They have. They've upgraded significantly, and those 2 guys are going to be guys on the top 100 list in the NFL next year when it comes out. Like, the Giants' talent pool, we keep talking about the talent, has increased. Do they have a long ways to go? Sure. I don't think anybody walked away from last week going, oh, now this team's a sleeper for the NFC Championship. But I think people are more open to the idea of, this team can compete for one of those last playoff spots, or dare I say a division, should the Eagles and Cowboys at all come back to the pack with sort of their problems. And by the way, I've heard plenty in Philly and Dallas where there's some negative tinge to those teams as well. So either way, look, this season can go really, really negatively, right? Like you could win 4 or 5 games. That's on the table. I don't think anybody's taking that off the table. But I think that there is at least an avenue for optimism with the New York Giants. And with that, I want to start with this week. I think a couple important things. Let's start with the Malik Nabers, Tyrone, Tracy news. Okay, Bryce, if we can. Look, when on Sunday, I got off the air on BetQL, and I see the update that Malik Nabers, shoe off, flexing his foot. I didn't think season ender, but I was just like, here we go again. The Giants just cannot avoid this. It reeked to me of when Odell Beckham Jr. had the hamstring injury his rookie year, and he still went on to explode that rookie year. But here's the deal. The Giants season, and this will be a theme here, Bryce, and I think you're in lockstep with me, weeks 1 and 2 versus the Vikings in Washington cannot be an 0-2 week. In fact, if you really want to make the playoffs, it should be a 2-0 first 2 weeks for the Giants. Malik Nabers has to be out there to start the year. So dodging the bullet and finding out this is a mild foot sprain or whatever it is and he's day-to-day, I think is an enormous relief for the New York Giants.
Absolutely. And of course I held my breath the same way that you did, because we've seen it so many times happen in the past where, and you mentioned how crucial it is for the Giants to get out to a good start. I've been mentioning this to a bunch of people that I talked to about the Giants. Like, the reason why they started off so poorly was one false start from Andrew Thomas. And that was the end of the season, just like that, because the next play, block kick, he gets hurt. And that's it. That's literally it. And that's how crucial that could be, those first couple drives, even in that first game or first two games.
Right.
So you lose Nabers, you lose the explosiveness you need to have on the offensive side of the ball. When you look at Daniel Jones, I know we're going to get into him a little bit later. When you look at Daniel Jones, he needs Malik Nabers just as much as anyone else in the world needs Malik Nabers. Even the hardest of Giants fans who want to win, who live and die by the Giants and them winning or losing, Daniel Jones needs Malik Nabers out there. So huge sigh of relief with that. And of course, I'm gonna lead us into the next one, and Tyrone Tracy, which is just unbelievable news. How does that even happen, Shaun? To go from potentially thinking this guy, so I mean, he gets put in an air cast, gets ordered off the field, and then he's back in team meetings in 2 hours. I mean, could you get any of a better situation?
I hate to over-exaggerate my feelings on this, but when you read aircast, people huddled around, cart off the field, that feels like Nick Gates a couple of years ago in the regular season, and that's just the first one that comes to mind. We've had a bunch of these, unfortunately, with the Giants. It's a gruesome injury. Of all the players that have an injury, I'm sure you could list more important ones than Tyrone Tracy, but Tyrone Tracy is an important one when you consider the fact that the Giants already drafted him at 25 years old with not a lot of tread on the tires at the running back position. He was a converted wide receiver running back. But at 25, if you figure it's a really gruesome injury and it takes a full year recovery, would he even be the same at age 26? I think it was Bobby Skinner tweeted this. So now you're talking about the third year in the league. Who knows, what the situation is with the team, and looking to get the best out of Tyrone Tracy at 27 years old. That's always the danger with drafting a guy like this who gets a little higher up in age, right? So that to me was like, this kind of player cannot have that kind of injury. Now, it looks like a low ankle sprain. Week to week is what it's being listed as. Some have speculated this could be a 3 to 6 week injury. Well, he's not going to be ready to start the year. And that's fine to me. You couldn't lose him for the full year, especially at the running back position, right? We're going to get back to something that we have stopped being accustomed to, which is running back by committee, with Devin Singletary being the lead guy. In a running back by committee, the situation is fluid. So if Tyrone Tracy is ready at the end of September, full go, that's fine to me. Because who knows whether that's, Turbo Miller or whether that's Eric Gray, who obviously had a great showing in the preseason game. Maybe those guys need a blow or something like that. Overall, just an unbelievable breath of fresh air, a gasp of fresh air, if you will, after it looked like worst-case scenario. And it kind of feels like early on the injury gods are shining on the New York Giants. And Tyrone Tracy obviously was really, really impressive in that preseason game with the Lions. And obviously it already, as a fifth-round pick, worked his way up to number 2 on a depth chart in a running back by committee situation. So a huge sigh of relief, and specifically for a player of that age coming out of the draft. He's somebody the Giants are going to rely on this year. So I just cannot believe we're at that turn of events here, Bryce, that he's going to be available.
It's unbelievable. It really is. And I just was not expecting that. I don't think anyone was expecting that to open up your phone right after the main tweet that came out that said this guy is essentially. When you hear that, it's like, how often are those people wrong? Like, how often are the medical staff wrong in putting the air cast on them? Not very often. They obviously, they use all the precautions they need to use. Yeah, I mean, they're precautionary. They thought that this could be a season-ending, maybe who even knows, career-ending injury, and then for it to turn into a low ankle sprain is just unbelievable.
Another quick injury that you won't catch on our lower third, Deontay Johnson, who obviously was the star of the defense in that preseason game. He's going to be out multiple weeks. That was a tough blow I read in practice as well. Wasn't there for that. He was taking reps from Micah McFadden with the ones, and he really seemed to be exploding. But much like Tyrone Tracy, you expect him to slide on. He'll probably, with the new rules on making the roster, be a preseason IR, be able to be removed from that. But that's clearly a guy in Shane Bowen's defense. But overall, no season enders thus far as we enter week 2, which, big win right now for the New York Giants, which is going to take us into Daniel Jones. The New York Giants will play Daniel Jones in his first action off the torn ACL. Obviously, everything that went awry last year with the neck, in a little bit of game action with the Texans. My guess is, Bryce, I don't know if you agree with this, we likely don't see him versus the New York Jets if we're seeing him in this game. This feels like the dress rehearsal for Daniel Jones. Now, on one hand, I'm guessing we don't see Malik Nabers in this game, which kind of sucks. You won't see that connection until the regular season. But I am firm on this. I know that if he went down in the preseason, that would be brutal, especially with the Giants with the injury guarantees and everything. But if he's going to go down with an injury, it's either going to happen in this spot or it's going to happen in the regular season. You already have Drew Lock banged up. I think Daniel Jones does need to play, specifically behind the 5 starters on this offensive line, and get some continuity. Because to me, for the season to be any bit of positive, it is about the 5 starting O-linemen, of which Evan Neal will not be one, it basically appears like, as he's been removed from PUP, and Daniel Jones playing behind them. So I trust Daniel Jones and Malik Nabers have done enough in practice that they'll figure it out. I need Jones to get a little preseason life in him behind the offensive line. I don't think that's a bad thing, Bryce.
I need to see 2 drives from Daniel Jones, and that's it. I mean, he's not going to play.
And take a hit. And take a hit.
Yeah, he does. He needs to take a hit. No neck injuries, no retorn ACL. This is such a crucial season for Daniel Jones, and it's essential that he gets out to a good rapport with his offensive line. I mean, as you mentioned, it's so essential that he is able to maneuver the pocket in ways that he hasn't been able to do, but that's all because of the offensive line, and he's just going to have to learn how to, I mean, who knows? I mean, he might have to adjust to playing with a good offensive line because he hasn't had one in his career. So I think that's essential going forward. And yeah, it's not a big deal that he's not going to be able to play with Nabers. The joint practices with the Lions are, I think, as real as you'll get in terms of what the practice they do in the the training camp and preseason. Preseason is nothing. You're playing a lot of backups, even the opposing defenses. No one's always playing their starters. You play the starters.
Where it's important, it's going to be a vanilla offense, right? They're not going to show a lot of the big plays, but there's things they can show, right? Like Daniel Jones being able to trust the offensive line enough to uncork a deep ball. I would like to see that, and we'll talk about that in a second. But more importantly, when you wear the red jerseys, even in the joint practices, Daniel Jones off the neck and the ACL, I got to see him just absorb hits, because it's not about like I want to see him get drilled into the ground. Of course, I don't want that. But I don't want him having any thought in the back of his mind the first 2 drives versus the Minnesota Vikings in week 1. All right, am I ready for this? Get that out of the way now.
Exactly. If he's able to see that this offensive line has changed and this is going to be a different type of season, it's going to change his mindset. He was constantly in the defensive mode. Where's the guy behind me? That's how he was. And how can you not be like that when you're literally getting hit? I forgot what the stat was. I mean, he was the worst in the league. He had like 2 seconds to get the ball out of his hands. I play the new college football game. When I have 2 seconds to get the ball out of my hand, I'm getting sacked every single time. I lose by 50 points.
Look at you.
So
you got to tell you don't have kids, Bryce. I could tell you don't have kids.
I've got a lot of free time in my hands right now, and I'm enjoying it at this point in my life. But there is something about seeing Daniel Jones develop the ability to learn and pass and play behind a good offensive line that is enticing, that I want to see before the season starts, Shaun. So we're in lockstep on that as well.
And let's be honest, he's in his 6th year. He's also not Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, where you could say, no, I even Aaron Rodgers, I don't need to see him in the preseason. No, I need to see Daniel Jones in the preseason. I do, because
he still has a lot to prove.
Of course.
At this point in his career,
of course. It's probably an indictment that we have to see him in year 6 of the preseason, but again, it's more about, for me, taking the hits and everything. All right. Houston Texans, New York Giants, Saturday, 1 p.m., preseason game number 2 before the preseason closes out the following week with the Jets, and, of course, that bye week leading into the opener. Before I get to what to watch for, Bryce and I plan on releasing a podcast sometime Monday morning in reaction to this game. Full disclosure, I'm sure I'm not going to be the only one listening to this podcast that this is true for. There is a major event at MetLife Stadium where it's going to be packed with 70,000 people, and that Zach Brown band, Kenny Chesney, full tailgate, full everything. I'm just being honest with you. That happens to take place Saturday. I'm going to be tailgating in that lot by 1:30. I am not going to see this game live. Regular season game, of course, I'm not going to a concert, preseason game. So I'm going to watch this game Sunday morning. In relation, we are going to tape a podcast, release it, all the breakdown, probably Monday morning. We're going to release it Sunday night. All right. Then I'm off to Lake George and my final pre-football thing. So I'm just kind of setting the tone for our podcast listeners. If you're looking for something Sunday morning, old Uncle Shawnee will have not seen the game yet until Sunday morning. Okay. That's the way it's going to be. All right. What to watch for? I just kind of laid out a little of the Daniel Jones things. Bryce, I'm going to give you 3 things I'm going to watch for. If I've missed anything that you're watching for, please follow. Here's number 1 for me. I got to see Daniel Jones throw a deep ball behind the offensive line. Now, Malik Nabers isn't going to be in the field. We assume at the time of taping this podcast that he's not. Maybe he's a freak, and he is a freak, and he gets out to fine. Whether that's Jalen Hyatt or Darius Slayton, insert whoever is going to be on that first team. I say this seriously. I don't even care if it's caught. I don't even care if it's completed. I just want to know that Daniel Jones has the trust behind the offensive line that he could throw one down the field, because all the tape last year showed behind that offensive line, he was really shy about doing it. And in year one under Pat Shurmur, and then it went less and less beyond Joe Judge, he was a gunslinger. He let it loose. Something, I think it was a mental thing with not trusting the offensive line. I need rebuilt trust. And I need to know, especially with a receiver like Jalen Hyatt, that Daniel Jones is going to be willing to take those chances. If he completes it, touchdown, tap dance, no doubt about it. I just want to see one. I don't want to see everything be a check down. One, hey, I'm letting this loose down the field just to tell me you're willing to do it. Yeah. That's number one, Bryce. You agree?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, so let's keep track of these, because if they don't, we'll recap them, obviously. Number two for me is continued growth with the offensive line at all levels. Dan Shire does a good job on the Big Blue Banter podcast, pointed this out, and I think it's so accurate. I watch like a nerd all these preseason games year in and year out. And what's amazing for as bad as the Giants' first-team offensive lines have been over the recent years, think about how bad their second and third-team offensive lines have been. Now they bring in Carmen Brasillo. Man, Tommy DeVito was allowed to operate an offense throughout that entire Lions game, including the run holes that the team had in the run game. Not that these guys are stars, Kubis and everybody else, Mayfield, all these guys, these random names you might see pop up on the practice squad. But the Giants' offensive line did look top to bottom, 1 through 22, or how many of them played, like a different unit in this game in the joint practices versus the Lions. I want to see that continue versus the Texans. And obviously with the starting O-line too, I want to see Jermaine Illuminor play well at right tackle. I want to see John Michael Schmitz back playing well at center. I just want to see continued growth from the O-line at all phases, because we talked about in off-season podcast, the addition of Carmen Brasillo was supposed to be a big addition for this team to get this offensive line finally going in the right areas, and depth is going to be important for this team there.
I need to see the offensive line continue to look connected. Something that I hit on by my own show that I do. I just, from what I saw, it's backups, Stinney, Schlottman, Izudu, like all these guys who hopefully will not get big minutes during the regular season. But what you saw from those guys is they look connected. They did. Yeah. They, as you mentioned, they gave Tommy DeVito ample time to throw the ball in the pocket. I need to see that continue. Is Evan Neal playing? Do we know if he's playing?
I don't know if he's going to play in the game. He's obviously returned to practice individuals. Yeah. Maybe they wait. I bet you he plays a lot versus the Jets, but he's not going to start anyway. So, it'd be great to see him play.
If you were to play, I think that would be like my one or two. I'm just really intrigued to see now in year three of just what but I doubt. I really do. And do you know if the Texans are going to be playing? Because I know last week the Texans played all their guys, so I doubt the Texans play their starters on offense. I really want to see the secondary against the Texans. They do have the best top three easily wide receiver rooms, maybe number one, Shaun. So I want to see those guys against them, but I think they play again.
That was number 3 for me. You nailed it. I think they still could play. That's a young head coach. They might go out there for a drive or two. I think without a doubt, to me, it's actually surpassed O-line. My biggest concern for the whole team this year is going to be the secondary. I'm starting to believe more and more in Tay Banks, though I'm very nervous that he's fully not like a number one corner. I think with Flott's injury that's occurred this week, we are trending towards Nick McLeod being the number 2 corner on this team. And boy, am I impressed with Drew Phillips in the nickel. I really am. After seeing him in person and then seeing him in the game, that's a different kind of dude. And it, how many times have the Giants missed on third-round picks? Maybe they finally freaking hit one here. That would be important. And then obviously Tyler Nubin brings a little bit of pop, and Pinnock and Belton. There's not a lot of sex appeal in the Giants secondary. I don't think I'm breaking any news there. But it's still a very, very unknown unit, and hopefully a unit that can prevail. With that being said, Bryce, I have to go to a very important show meeting now. And on top of that, I've drained my laptop battery dry. We're going to be back with you Monday morning at Bryce Gelman, at Shaun Morash. One Giant Step. Download and subscribe everywhere podcasts are available. Thank you, everybody, for taking one giant step with us.